parents want to know that their kids are in a well-ventilated classroom. And how do you know if it's well ventilated or not? The way that you know is by measuring the CO2. Again, the mantra, you cannot manage what you don't measure.
Welcome to NAI 500's special coverage series, where we cover up-and-coming small-cap stocks on the TSX Venture Exchange, the Canadian Securities Exchange, NASDAQ, and OTC markets. Earlier this week, we interviewed Ted Konyi, Strategic Advisor for Airtest Technologies, ticker symbol AAT, on the TSX Venture Exchange. AAT designs, manufactures, and markets air monitoring, sensor, and control equipment that helps reduce energy usage while also ensuring sufficient ventilation in HVAC systems. A few highlights our readers should know before watching the interview are: AAT's products are already in use by school districts, retail chains, and office buildings around North America. Its new suite of wireless devices promises to revolutionize the industry and grow market adoption. And its products are seeing increased adoption due to both the pandemic and global warming crises. Please like our video and subscribe to our channel to help us get more cutting-edge stock coverage to the market.
Hi, Ted. Thank you for joining us today for NAI 500 special coverage interview.
Hey, Philip. Thanks for having me for this interview. Appreciate it.
Tell us who is behind Airtest and why should investors keep an eye on you?
So as you pointed out, Philip, Airtest is a green technology company. It's in the business of manufacturing and deploying systems that improve the efficiency of one of the major components in most buildings, which is the HVAC, or heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. They've been in that business for over 20 years. They've managed to stay at the leading edge of the technology curve. And of course, what ends up happening is the opportunity is huge due to the fact that a lot of buildings are not equipped with the latest and greatest technology.
Tell us about your suite of products and how they will revolutionize the HVAC industry.
Sure. Okay. So basically, when we talk about energy efficiency for HVAC, or heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, it's a case of understanding that because heating, ventilation, air conditioning consumes so much energy in building operations, that with the advent of being able to better measure the amount of ventilation that's required, and that typically is by measuring CO2 levels inside buildings, whether those are stores or schools or restaurants or airports, all places where the public can go. If you measure the CO2, then you can better manage the amount of ventilation, better manage the amount of heating, better manage the amount of air conditioning that's required in that space. And so the company lives by the mantra of you can't manage what you don't measure. That's the most important aspect. How it's revolutionizing the HVAC industry is that methodology for measuring what the CO2 levels are is something that up until recently has been entirely on a wired basis. And the revolutionary part of this business, and the reason people should keep an eye on it today, is that, in fact, by the advent of wireless sensors, you now can eliminate a lot of the labor and materials associated with installing a system in a retrofitted building. Airtest sells to a variety of different end users. Some are intermediaries like contractors. So Airtest sells to HVAC contractors that deploy these sensor systems for their customers. And it sells to end users. So end users being the stores themselves. It also sells to companies that incorporate some of the technologies that Airtest has in their own products. Those are original equipment manufacturers or OEM manufacturers. So you've got OEM manufacturers that sell control systems that would incorporate Airtest's sensors and other technologies in their systems, and then resells those. Airtest is currently targeting primarily large retail store chains, and specifically, given the current scenario, not so much retail stores for a lot of the businesses that are going online, but specifically people like grocery stores, where they've seen their businesses actually increase during the current pandemic. as well as places like schools, where in fact there's a lot more concern today with indoor air quality. So those are the primary focuses for the company.
You know, as a venture company, investors should be happy to see that Airtest has reached sustainable gross profits, as well as growing its breadth of customers across Canada and the US. You know, when can investors start seeing the company hit net profit milestones?
So, very good question, Philip. In fact, you know, given what's gone on this year, it's been a particularly challenging year for a lot of businesses. And Airtest as well has suffered a little bit because of the consequences of the pandemic, and a lot of its customers have pulled back on larger projects for retrofitting their structures. However, on the other hand, what's become clearly evident and where it's going to, I think, positively impact the company from a revenue and a profitability perspective is the fact that indoor air quality, or as it's known in the industry, IAQ, is become more and more important wherever the public is congregating, whether that's in schools, whether that's in stores. And again, indoor air quality is a function of the amount of ventilation, and the amount of ventilation can be measured by using the proxy of CO2. CO2 is what we breathe out. If CO2 levels climb, it tells you that, in fact, you're not getting the appropriate ventilation. So there's a huge opportunity for the company, both with respect to energy efficiency, meaning that oftentimes buildings are over-ventilated when there's not a lot of population there, and that's going on today too. You know, we see the lineups outside of stores where people are not allowed to come into a store. Restaurants are limited to maximum of 50% of the capacity. As a result, a lot of these places are being over-ventilated. On the other hand, places like schools, parents want to know that their kids are in a well-ventilated classroom. And how do you know if it's well-ventilated or not? The way that you know is by measuring the CO2. Again, the mantra, you cannot manage what you don't measure.
That's very true. And our next question really covers, you know, what you've just said. With the current crisis getting to a third wave, do you see Airtest products seeing greater adoption?
Yes, Philip, we already are seeing greater adoption. We're getting lots more calls to the company relative to some of the sensor systems that the company has, and in fact, we expect that to be demonstrated in the next couple of quarters as we get some of the benefit of some of this additional business that's coming our way. The other thing is that we're wanting to grow the business, and we've realized that somewhat we've been focused on the geographic area, the Pacific Northwest. We've been winning a lot of business there. We're adding additional sales representatives and other resources, marketing resources, to broaden the geographic penetration that the company has.
Now, looking past our current crisis, we see that the market is beginning to really take the impending climate change crisis very seriously. Your suite of products was originally designed to address climate change through the reduction of energy use. Why do you believe that your product catalog will see greater acceptance from your customer base with this in mind?
Well, I think that you're right. The green wave, if you will, is really starting to take hold and get a lot of traction. It's getting traction, obviously, with the population. It's going to start to get a lot of traction with companies and the way they operate their businesses. They want to reduce the amount of energy, because the production of energy is what causes a lot of the greenhouse gas. The renewable energy sources are still relatively small compared to the hydrocarbon energy sources that are out there. And so using less makes sense. Typically, though, it's always been a case of it has to make economic sense. And the massive paradigm shift that's going on right now from the perspective of the consumers, the corporate consumers looking to be greener, we're able to take advantage of that because of this paradigm shift on the technology. It's a technology that's not been available before. The idea of these wireless sensor systems that allow for a significant reduction, in fact, almost the elimination of the labor costs, and significant reduction in the materials costs. As a result, the economics of installing energy efficiency for HVAC systems like what Airtest can do, is significantly improved and will be seeing much better adoption because of the economics. So you've got two things working for you. You've got way better economics now with the new technology that's available. And I think we're going to see a lot of adoption for that reason, for the economic reason. But you've also got a push afoot that says, hey, we want to improve what we do as far as the environment's concerned. A lot of these companies, they want to play to their constituents that are very interested in what they're doing for the climate and climate change. And so the fact that this is also now a new motivation for them. So it's not only economic, it's also looking at the benefit for retaining their customers and getting additional customers.
Great. Leading to that, I mean, we saw a press release that came out recently that he signed a deal with a real estate investment trust that owns over 270 locations. Now, what does that mean for your Q4 revenues? And can this be seen as another milestone in having your products adopted by the wider market?
So, Philip, we've obviously seen a drop in revenues during this COVID period. Our second quarter was less than the second quarter in 2019 as a function of it. We anticipate that the third quarter will also be slightly down. However, we're now seeing this trend that we've been talking about where there's further adoption that's coming along, there's more interest, and we expect that the fourth quarter will be significantly improved. Signing a deal with this real estate investment trust where they have over 270 properties, they operate more than 85,000 apartments, but a lot of their properties are mixed retail and apartment properties. And we see that they're wanting to do more of what we have been preaching, which is the energy efficiency side of things, and we would expect that to carry on. It will definitely impact the fourth quarter. It'll be back in line likely with the previous fourth quarter of 2019. But as this relationship grows, we also see the benefit of potentially a lot of references from here. You know, other real estate investment trusts, other major property managers are looking at doing exactly the same thing.
So we know, you're working with a lot of well-known companies and brands here in North America. Can you name a couple of large groups that you're currently supplying to?
Well, I'd love to use some of the really large names that we're working with, and unfortunately, in our world, a lot of those companies don't want to divulge what they're doing. Oftentimes, they see it as a competitive advantage. That they want to keep any secrets, if you will, to themselves. They don't want us sharing. Suffice it to say that some of these companies that we're working with are some of the largest in North America. And I'm not trying to avoid the question. I'm being a bit careful with the names that are associated with who we're working with. What we have become public about is that we have successfully in the past done installations through contractors into Shoppers Drug Mart, through contractors into IKEA, through other contractors into Canadian Tire, and one of the big customers that we've had in the US is Lowe's stores. So again, the common theme here is a lot of retail locations, because retail locations have a high population variability.
Great. So as small cap growth stock, investors are likely to be buying your shares based on your future value rather than just your existing sales. What are you going to do in terms of R&D to keep your products on the cutting edge of the market?
So this has been an ongoing thing for the company, is that they have continued to spend some amount of money on a regular basis with research and development. It's led to this wireless CO2 sensor that's now batteryless as well as being wireless. It simply harvests light in order to power itself. In addition, some of the new R&D that we're working on right now is to add other communication protocols for the sensors, so that they can work with a wider array of building management systems and energy management systems.
Great. You're currently raising funds. Tell us a little bit more about that raise, and more importantly, what shareholders can see in progress after the raise.
Yeah, so we've just completed a raise here about, it must be now almost 2 months ago. it was $500,000 that really took care of increasing some inventories, providing for some of this R&D. There were some outstanding accounts payable that it took care of. The current $500,000 financing that we're in the midst of, which should be completed and potentially will be oversubscribed in the next week, it will provide some funding for additional sales representation. It'll provide some funding as far as additional marketing. And then we are also having to continue to increase our inventory levels so that we can supply sales in a timely manner.
Lastly, we see that COVID-19 has affected all of us in 2020. Given the nature of the pandemic, have you seen uptick in interest in your CO2 products? And how does your CO2 products actually help with this pandemic?
So again, yes, COVID has been a big issue for the world, of course, and for a lot of the companies that we're dealing with, a lot of our customers. After an initial shock period and a fall off in sales, I think most people were trying to figure out what was going to happen, how long was this going to be around for. We're starting to see this new adoption of their product because of indoor air quality. Indoor air quality has become paramount. I think about places like schools, for instance, where kids are back in the classroom, parents are anxious about, is their child going to be exposed to something with all of these kids together in a classroom? How does one understand whether there's proper ventilation or not? Because ventilation is the key to keeping the transmission down of this particular pandemic. It's an aerosol-driven transmission, and so ventilation will, in fact, assist the situation. It's not going to be a cure-all by any stretch, but if you have proper ventilation, well, okay, so how do you know? Again, I fall back on the mantra of the company, which is you can't manage what you don't measure. And so they have to measure ventilation. Well, how do you measure ventilation? The best proxy for ventilation in an enclosed space where you've got people is the CO2 levels. If the CO2 levels keep climbing, it tells you there's not enough fresh air being brought in. We all know that CO2 is the greenhouse gas. The ambient level outside in the open is about 400 parts per million. We as individuals can easily withstand 2,000 parts per million. That's not a problem. But if the CO2 levels in a classroom, for instance, climb above 600 or 800 parts per million, it's telling you something. It's telling you that there's not enough fresh air diluting the level of CO2. So CO2 sensors are the best proxy for ventilation, and as a result, the best proxy for determining indoor air quality and addressing the issues associated with the COVID-19.
Thanks, Ted. We're very glad to have you at our interview today. Tell us how we can reach you if our investors have any questions.
So the best way to reach the company is through its website, and I can be reached as well. I'm a financial consultant to the company, a strategic consultant to the company. I can be reached on my email at tkonyi@gmail.com, which I'm sure you can put up on the screen, and through the company's primary phone lines as well.
Thank you very much, Ted. We'll join you next time for an update, I'm sure, in the next quarter.
Great. Thanks for having me, Philip. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into NAI 500's special coverage of Airtest Technologies. To see more content like this, including interviews with up-and-coming public companies, please subscribe and like our video. You can also find our daily updated content on Facebook, LinkedIn, WeChat, and NAI500.com.